Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll say welcome to Middleborough Public Schools and welcome to Oak Point, but I don't speak on behalf of Oak Point, but on behalf of the Middleborough Public Schools, we thank you for coming. I'm going to introduce Tim Bonifati. Tim is with the Owner's Project Manager, or OPM, that we're working with on this proposed high school. And he's been working with us for about a year now, a little over a year and a half. And great detail guy, which we need. And he's here. He represents the town on this project, and he is going to talk to you about basically the beginning of the structure of the project. So, Tim.
Thanks, Brian. So, Brian mentioned we're the OPM on the project. We have another project team partner, DRA. They're the architects. Jim Barrett's here from DRA. Two groups that I definitely want to mention, the school building committee, which Middleborough is being very well served by their school building committee. They put an awful lot of time into this project. They meet every month, actually before we were involved. And within that, they've selected a subcommittee of members who work with us. Every 2 weeks we meet. It's a working group, and we work through all the details of the project so that we as a project team get decisions from them, we get direction. They've been excellent to work with, and again, I think it's a real tribute to the town how interested, as you can see, they come out on nights like tonight to support the project. The other group I want to mention is the Mass School Building Authority, the MSBA. So the MSBA, aside from providing a significant funding grant to the project, which we'll talk about a little bit later, they also provide a lot of input on projects. They see dozens of schools in the course of a year, so they have best practices. They see what works, what doesn't work, and Middleborough and other communities are the benefit of getting that feedback, and they've been really helpful in the project to us as a project team. So that makes up our project team. Next slide. This is a timeline of where we've been to date. So the project essentially started when the MSBA invited Middleborough into the building assistance program. The school department was engaged with the MSBA for years prior to that, but the actual start of the project timeline is in January of 2015. After that occurred, the town received approval for its feasibility study. It then spent the next 6 months, it's a bit of a process to get through hiring both us as the OPM and the architect. And design started in earnest, and feasibility and planning around the school started in earnest in July of 16. As you can see, from then on, it was very important to the building committee. It was a directive to all of us on the project team to make sure that this project had as much input from the public as possible, and also was transparent. So we have a website where basically everything we do is shown, and you can go on that website, which you'll see the web address for. And so that sort of is evidenced by these community forums. At every step of the way, we would have a community forum, including one here, and we would go through where we were in the process, get input on it, and that input was very important to us to understand what the community felt, and we ended up with 3 of them in the course of from September through March. The MSBA board approved the preferred option that you'll see tonight in May of this year. And an important thing that happened over the summer was the town purchased the adjacent parcel of land, the Wood Street parcel, that it fills out the parcel, and as you'll see, provides a lot of benefit to the school project in terms of circulation, and it really is a big asset, and then frankly it was a very good price. Next slide, yeah. So it was a process-driven decision-making approach from day one. This is actually a bit of an agenda of what you'll see tonight, too. This sort of lays out how the presentation is set up. The education plan is the first thing we do on a project, and that is working with the school administration, primarily Principal Brannigan, but also with Superintendent Lynch, to develop in their voice what do they want, how do they want education to be delivered in Middleborough High School in the years to come. And so Paul's going to get into that in more detail. But that's a critical part of how we and the architect learn the design and the process. Are we complying with the ed plan? Do we further the ed plan by the decisions we're making in the design process? The next step was to put as many options as we could for the school onto the table. Add reno, different sites. We had 3 different sites, many options, at least 9 options. I think we may have had more sub-options even. We also then developed criteria but you'll see sort of a list of the things that the options were measured against, and as much as possible to make this as objective a decision-making process as possible. That got us to a short list which we took 4 options and developed in much greater detail. And those options were 2 ad reno options and 2 new construction options, all 4 of them at the high school site. After that analysis was done, we ended up with the project you'll see tonight. That is the preferred option that you'll see. So that's the process. Principal Brannigan's going to talk about the ed plan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Brannigan. I'm the principal at the high school, and I'm going to do the best I can. I'm fighting a horrible cold, but it's really interesting that 1 year ago, actually, this month, we sat at the Boston Tavern in their function room with an idea. And that idea really became the vision of what you see here in these displays. For 3 days, the members of the faculty, administrative team, students, community members, we all came together to really talk about what should the next Middleborough High School be. And over those 3 days, it really started to form kind of what type of learning do we want our students to have and what's important in a 21st century education. And the diagram that you see on the right that looks like just a bunch of bubbles and arrows is really what the product was after those 3 days. And then from there, we went into 2 days, very intensive days at the high school for the architectural programming meetings. And what those meetings were is that the architectural team came into the high school and we met with every single person in the building, meaning every content area, every specialist, the custodians, the cafeteria staff, and we even pulled about 50 students to be able to meet with the architects to talk about what they'd like to see in their school. So from all of those events, my charge then was to begin the writing of really what the story would be for Middleborough High School. And that education plan that Tim spoke of, these are some of the highlights that came out of that. And what's amazing is to go from that bubble chart to really what you see here in the floor plans and in the designs. It really was the story of a collective voice. That it wasn't one person at a table, it wasn't one person sitting in an office at a computer. It really was the voice of an entire school community to say what's next for our school. You'll notice up here in the slide that just some of the nuances or some of the exciting parts of our building is that one of the big things was really making sure that our 21st century learning could come to life. So you'll notice the fact of our student commons, that when you walk into the building, you would see really almost very much like what a student union would look like in a college or university. It's a place for students to be. Before school, during the day, after school, it would be the hub of students every day in that building. It would allow for group meetings, it would allow for presentations, it would allow for any sort of club or organization to meet, and even in the evenings for community events as well. And then student commons would also be our dining area as well. So it becomes a very multi-purpose space. Because one of the things about this building that we really were hoping for and really worked at is to make sure it's a flexible space. One of the challenges right now in our current building is that when it was built in the late 60s, it was made for that time period and it was made for education. It was a cutting edge building at the time. But now when you transform or fast forward 40 plus years, it's very limited of the space of what you can do to be flexible. And that was something we wanted to make sure in this new building that we could grow and evolve as education evolves as well over the decades to come. The Learning Commons would be right above it, and the Learning Commons would be really just our media center, but also much more than that. It would be really a place for students to come and collaborate and to communicate and to present. Envision students being able to leave their classroom areas into this central location where everything flows into this one space, where students would be able to be and to study and to research and to also be able to bring their creations to life. And this is a really essential element of the building. We also want to create identity. And you'll notice that you see 4 areas that are really important to us. And you'll see it in the designs that will be explained in more detail soon. But we want to create a humanities center or a humanities wing where you would see where languages and history and English come to life. You would see a STEAM wing, which would be our science, technology, engineering, math, and we included our visual arts program into that part of the building because we found through our vision planning that it was really important to take our entire art program and kick it up a notch as well and to really create a 3-dimensional approach. So when you walk into those areas, you know you're in the arts, you know you're in humanities, you know you're in STEM. And then we also have our performing arts at Middleborough High School. The arts, our theater program, our music program is really one of the hallmarks of the school. And that we really wanted to make sure that when you walked into the Performing Arts Center, you knew that you were in the arts. So that we would have our own identified kind of story to tell about that part of our school community, as well as the athletic learning facility, our gym and our weight rooms and our fitness center. And again, when you walk in, you'll be able to see Sage of Pride, our Hall of Fame, so that no matter what part of the building you're in, it's going to tell the story of our students in many ways and really the identity of who we are. You'll notice the fabrication lab and the maker space. This is an important element of our school, and here's why. Our charge, was really not to create opportunities that our students can have someplace else. Our students who go to Bristol Plymouth will still go to Bristol Plymouth. But really what we wanted to do is to take our current programming and how to bring it to the next level. For example, we have a very vibrant program called Computer-Aided Design, where our students can go on the computer and they can build homes and they can build sheds and they can really create those graphical designs. But one of the challenges that we have is that's all they can do with it. Once they create it on the computer, that's pretty much where it ends. And the fabrication lab will allow them to take those designs and then transform it into the fabrication lab where the students can actually bring it to life into a much different approach. It's taken our theater program and allowing them to really create their sets and really create a technical theater program as well, which we currently don't have. So that fabrication lab and the makerspace really allow all of our content areas to have a piece of the puzzle. And really just you'll notice some of the modalities that are there. One of the important elements to know as a community member is that it's really about flexibility. You'll notice in the designs that when you transcend the 3 floors, you'll notice the fact that the history is on one floor and the English department's on another. And that's very strategic because right now we're a department-based school. And we really thought that was an important element. However, as we evolve and transform in the building, the idea is you could create academies, you could create interdisciplinary approaches, because you'll notice our science labs go all 3 floors of the building, not currently how we have it, where all of them are formed on the 3rd floor of the building. So it's really allowing us to be able to take a building and to really create different aspects of education, learning academies, a freshman academy, because as we move in the building, as we evolve, the building can evolve with us as well. And lastly, you'll just notice some of the things that we were really going for. Our teacher planning centers. You'll notice that in the building, that all of our content area teachers are together. So we'll have a history planning center for all the history teachers in English. But what's really nice about these spaces is that they back up to another content area. So we envision the ability to make that space even bigger and having all of our English teachers and history teachers really create a humanities approach someday to really do a lot of interdisciplinary learning. The small learning communities in every content area or every floor, there's these collaborative spaces that are funneled right from every classroom in the building, which is kind of cool. We're also looking at our schedule. Right now we have a block schedule, and then moving into a new building, one of the things we're doing is really exploring how can you create a day in a life for students that's very different than what they currently have. We're testing the waters now of creating a schedule within a schedule. Some of our students have 5 periods in the day, other students have 4. So it's really an opportunity for us to really do some experiments as we're getting ready potentially to move into a new environment. And lastly, just the school structure. It's really something that as our vision planning that went from that bubble you saw a few moments ago is to really create a building that we can grow with for many, many years to come. So thank you. So introduce Chip Barrett from DRA.
Thanks, Paul. Good evening, and thanks for coming out. What I want to share with you now are some of the activities that we undertook early on in the feasibility study. And during the feasibility study, we looked at the bones of the building. You know, what's the condition of this building? How well has it served the community? And it has done a great job for nearly 50 years. And so much so that as we apply for the MSBA grant application, recognition for that care of the building is given by MSBA in their assessment of the funding that they provide here to the community. But there are things within it that are structural. This building is a very large block building, so there are core classroom spaces within it that has no natural light within the space. They have to be mechanically ventilated. And that is something that is very difficult to modify going forward. Down the left-hand column, this was an assessment of the spaces, and those spaces that are rendered in red are those that would be identified as undersized as compared to or inadequate relative to current guideline standard through MSBA program. And those in yellow are in fair shape, and those in terms of the blues that you see within that are at or above current standard. So there's some real need within the existing facility relative to how we shape the space and how much is there currently to be utilized. As Tim touched on, we went through a series of different options and alternatives. The top row are those of addition and renovation alternatives that we undertook for the existing high school. The middle row is that of new construction, exploring new construction options at the high school site. And down below, we looked at a new construction site at the middle school site as well, and then over at the Tispequin parcel. And those were all explored, but they represented kind of the breadth of the exploration that we had early on in the feasibility study. So as we took that and worked our way through, we looked at the existing site at the high school, but also new location. So we did consider, as I just suggested, the middle school site as well as the Tispequin site. Both of those were early on set aside for a variety of reasons: traffic, size, topography. We focused on the high school site, and one thing we looked at is base repairs. What if we just simply kept the building we had in the shape that it is, meaning the configuration, and just upgraded all the systems? So that is something that we did explore. We also then explored in the middle block renovation alternatives, 6 of them, and to the right, new construction alternatives. We had 3 of those. As we went through the feasibility study, we were able to eliminate a series of those options. And for what was called the preferred option selection, as we submitted to MSBA, we had 2 renovation and add schemes, and those are represented as C and D to the left, and 2 new construction options at the high school site. Ultimately, the option A was identified as the preferred alternative, and that was a new construction approach at the site. What I can share with you here are some of the renovation and addition alternatives that we looked at. The area that is in blue within this diagram are areas of existing school. The areas in red are additions. And so what this represents in this plan, this portion of the building is the existing building with a large classroom addition off the back side of the building. And in doing so, what we were able to do was then offload the population that's currently housed in the existing building to this new location, and then renovate and demolish portions of the existing building to fulfill the needs of that particular alternative. Other options looked at the new construction to the front, and as we look at option B, we maintained in blue the area of existing, and then what is in red is new construction. In option C, the majority of the building in blue is kept, and you see small additions to both ends of the building in red. What this option required was a lot of modulars. So these are temporary classrooms brought to the site. And those would have to be brought in at an expense and then ultimately sent off-site when we're done. So there was a cost center associated to that that wasn't advantageous from the planning standpoint. And then lastly, an option that kept this portion of the building and built new at this section, but again, a large need for classroom space as part of a modular barn. So these were the options that we ultimately focused on as renovation and addition options. And then in terms of new construction, we focused on the existing site. One option, this is the shaded area of the existing building. This is just off to the left of it as you come in off of Grove Street. And then a second, which was further back in the site, more along the area of the existing track and field area on the site. We took those 4 options and we tested them and we looked at them in a variety of ways. We also brought it out to the community in terms of workshops. As Tim had mentioned, we had an opportunity to have a workshop here at Oak Point. I believe it was in March. And as we did that work, we looked at each of the options, and those options to the right here are those of the renovation scopes of work. Those options to the left are the 2 options that were the new construction options. And as we went through this exercise at this workshop, we had the people that attended actually kind of place their ideas in terms of voting yes or no in terms of favoring one over another alternative, and we're able to develop an understanding of what people thought. And what we found was that people were more aligned with the new construction option for the variety of reasons that were identified as advantageous, but they also identified that it was more of a blending of the 2 options rather than a pure taking of one or the other of the 2 alternatives that were formed. So we continued on in the process with that in mind. This is a look at a final evaluation method that we used. This matrix puts a series of evaluation criteria down the left-hand column, and then across the top, each of the different options that were explored. This first one is pure upgrades at the building, no new construction. The 2 next are the addition renovation options, and then lastly, the 2 new construction options. And as we looked at the specific criteria, for instance, this is one, it talks about parking, we rated them on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most advantageous. And as we tallied those, we found that new option A was that option through this methodology that seemed to be most promising. And so we also looked at it in another way. We had cost estimators look at the various options that were being explored and give to us an idea of what would it cost the community ultimately to develop these. This column looks at total square feet. Across the top down this listing are 5 different options, and it starts at the top with new construction option A, which was the preferred alternative, new construction option B, and then 2 add renovation schemes, and then an option that simply said, let's repair in place what we have. And as the cost estimators looked at it, they developed these various cost centers, square feet of construction or renovation, square feet of new construction, increase or to auditorium if that was the case, and then ultimately estimated total construction costs and then estimated total project costs. And what this yielded, interestingly, relative to the repairs option, that total project costs, now these might be done over a 5-year period, the total cost to the community would be at about $65 million. As we looked at the preferred option A, total project cost identified at $104 million. But there is state participation in this project and less in this here, and that will be spoken of later on in the presentation. This was a listing of the various town agencies and departments that we've had opportunity to meet with. It's been an iterative process from the outset, and we expect to continue this. So as we move forward, we will continue to meet with Board of Health, Fire Department, Police Department, etc., to ensure that we're thinking about the issues that are important to them, to provide a safe environment, to provide a school that will meet the needs of the community going forward. And now what I'd like to do is touch on some of the planning. And this is the preferred option that we are identifying. This red dashed area is that of the existing school, and that would remain in place during the construction. This is the footprint of the proposed new building. One thing that I'd like to touch on is this site plan is something that just doesn't happen. It's a pretty picture, easily seen, but it has to be phased. We have to allow this building to remain while this is under construction. And it was touched on earlier that the acquisition of the Wood Street parcel was very important to this process. What it provides is a secondary means of entrance to the site and egress from the site. And in doing so, from Wood Street, we're able to bifurcate the site such that the contractor might take this portion of the site and use the Wood Street exit, while the school function would operate off of the existing East Grove Street entrance. And school activities would be ongoing without cross-trafficking with the construction activities. Generally, in terms of layout of the site, the full field deployment around the perimeter of the site, the existing building, as we touched on, entrance from East Grove would have 3 entrance roads, one coming in for parent drop-off along this zone, another for parking into this area, and then another tier of parking off to the side. That could be for staff, teachers, etc., dedicated parking. Buses would come to the site off of this once construction is complete and line up along this backside. Students from the buses would enter off the backside, parent drop-off students coming from this side to a common kind of core at the center of the building. Once everybody's in the building, this entrance would become the main entrance of the building. So that would be the place where you'd be buzzed into the building on a regular day in, day out basis of coming to the school as a visitor. This is a diagram of the first floor plan. As Principal Brannigan touched on, we worked very carefully and closely with administration, with teachers, with students, with staff members, custodial, to come to understand how the school could best work. This entrance point is that main entrance point off of the parent drop-off side of the building, once again, to orient you. This is that main lobby space. And this entrance point is that of the bus drop-off. Once all the students are loaded into the building, this would be locked off for the remainder of the day, and this becomes the main entrance point to the facility. And as we look at the facility, this zone is administration. This zone, as Principal Brannigan identified, is a combination of sciences in the dark purple and core academic in the lighter lavender color. Here it's identified as English, and so it reflects the departmental model that's utilized today. Everything to the left of the diagram as you look at it, these are the more public elements of the building. We have the auditorium space, which is very much sized as the existing auditorium is. It has a black box theater associated with it. There is band, music classroom in this zone, gymnasium, locker room in this zone. When you think about the building from a zoning standpoint, you can enter the building through the performing arts wing lobby space in this zone, or from the gym lobby space in this zone, and not have to come across and go into this portion of the building. So from a security standpoint, we have a good opportunity to have an after-hours usage that doesn't include having to come over into the academic side of the house. And that type of planning is carried through all 3 floor plans in terms of that type of separation. As we move up into the building on the 2nd floor, from a planning standpoint, this 2nd floor plan is very similar to that of the first. This zone, very important, this blue area, is that of the Learning Commons. And as Principal Brannigan identified, the Media Center, in concert with a Learning Commons, affords an area for students to come together, great collaboration space, learning space, an opportunity for quiet study as well, all within that area, but right at the core of the building. To the left-hand side of the house, this upper portion is television production and studio, the upper portion of the auditorium, and this is the upper portion of the gymnasium, but over this area are some student fitness and weight room facilities. There is also a small mezzanine balcony that overlooks the court space for opportunity for filming of sports, etc., and another viewing area. This zone is that of the Futures program, and the Futures program within its self-contained area, having its own entrance point to the facility, but also access to the general common areas of the building as needed by those students. And as we come up to the third level, all of the areas on the left-hand side, which are the public, fall away. They become roofscape. To the right, we do have one more core area for academic, the combination of science and, in this case, world language on the third floor. The light blue area at the top is that of the art spaces. And these art spaces can work together and then also with things like movable partition to be able to create larger studio space, combined studio space. It also has within it a digital arts media space. The next thing we'd like to share is just a quick overview of some of the exterior views of the building. This is an aerial view as you're coming from East Grove Street, looking at the facade of the building. This being the main entrance point with the signage of the building. In terms of the vocabulary of the building, what we are looking to are traditional elements found here throughout the community, mill buildings, some of the brick iconic buildings here with the community as well. Elements like oriel windows that are reinterpreted, large combined windows grouped together in ways that may have been used in mill buildings, etc. This is that entrance point to the arts area, and again, the main entrance point to the facility. As we come to these two images, this is a close-up of that entrance area, so parent drop-off along this area, and then pedestrian walking into that entrance point to the facility. This view taken up the sidewalk a little bit more towards East Grove Street, looking into that main entrance portion of the building. This slide shares with you an idea of what the drop-off area might look like. This is the bus drop-off, that back entry point to the building. Off to the left-hand side of it, this is the student commons area, the dining facility, but also a place for gathering throughout the day. With good opportunity for outdoor use of space along the side of the building. And our landscape architect is working closely with us in terms of developing those ideas around how the exterior of the building will complement the learning spaces of the interior so that learning can happen anywhere on this site. Oops. There we go. These are two interior images. This taken from that student's common space. So you've entered, this is the stair leading up to the learning commons area. This another view as you look across the spine of the building. And then these images looking from the upper area along that learning commons, looking down into the student commons area, giving you a sense of kind of the variety of furnishings so that you could have different types of groupings of students coming together for individual study, team learning opportunities, both quiet and active study in these areas. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Tim Bonfatti, who's going to share with you some of the finance information on the project.
So this is how much the project will cost. So a couple of notes on this slide. It's an all-in cost, so this covers everything, both the construction, the soft costs, the furnishings, the equipment, the technology. Obviously, the big dollars in this project, in this slide is the construction cost. We had two separate estimates done of the cost by two independent estimators and reconciled those, so we're comfortable that that cost of construction will prove true at bid day. We both DRA and Compass have had a lot of experience with public schools, and we're very familiar with what costs should be for those schools. Another point is the contingency line items. So, we try to, as much as possible, plan for whatever costs we think are out there in the construction costs, what it would cost to build the school. But there's always stuff that comes up in construction that you don't plan for, and so that is our contingency line item. We feel comfortable that it is appropriate, not too generous, but generous enough to cover it's certainly based on previous experience, what we would expect as surprises during the project. So that is an all-in cost. We expect fully that that will be sufficient to build and turn the key over to the school department when it's completed. The MSBA is reimbursing the project subject to their review. We still are working through some final details, but roughly $42.6 million. So just a quick note on the MSBA reimbursement program. The MSBA funding comes from your state, your taxes, your sales tax. So they get a dedicated portion of the sales tax, and they fund school projects every year. Only somewhere between 15 to 20% of the applicants into the program get accepted. So there's a lot of people who want to be in the program who, and there just isn't enough money to fund all the projects at any given time. So it's really quite an opportunity for Middleborough to be in the program. $42.6 million is your money being returned to you. It's a good investment, and that estimated town share is essentially what we project, pretty much what the cost would be if we had to repair this school for the next 10 years or so. So this is a way to get a brand new school that will be suit the town for easily the next 50 years, if not longer, and do it basically for the cost it would take to repair the school and put it and bring it up to code and fix all the problems within the school. So, this is how that cost translates to a tax impact. As you can see, we had a valuation tax table done by the town treasurer, and these are sort of some sample home values on the left. If you take the typical or the average home assessment in Middleborough, roughly $300,000, the maximum tax impact, which would be felt probably sometime, depending on the timing of borrowing, but probably in 2020, would be $553. The minimum tax impact is $249 for an average tax impact of $391 for a home value of $300,000. And as you can see on the chart, it's sort of a direct declining line over the course of a 30-year bond. So that was a description of where we've been and where we're at now, and this is our timeline going forward. So the town meeting is this Monday, Monday night. The election, the debt exclusion override is on November 4th. October of next year is when we expect to go out to bid to general contractors. So we have to complete the design. What you see here represents, well, a lot more detail than what you see here, but we're about 25% into the design. We have to complete the design and the permitting. We continue working with the MSBA on design review. That takes roughly close to a year. The town, if we go out for bid to general contractors in 2018, we expect to occupy the new school in January of 2021, so we would move in over the Christmas break. And then the rest from January through to the next fall would be the demolition of the old school and the remaining site work and parking and fields construction that needs to occur. Basically, the project would be complete in total in September of 2021.
Thanks, Tim. My name is Rob DeRozier. I'm the chairman of the building committee. What we're here tonight to tell you is we think we have the right school for Middleborough at this point. The current school is past its useful life, and we've looked at trying to save it. A lot of us went into this assuming that we'd be able to renovate it and save it, but it's not the most cost-effective thing for the town, and it won't really meet our educational plan going forward. We've held the process. like we do this meeting tonight, we've held lots of meetings. Try to be open and honest and gather a lot of public input in the process so that the community is involved. We think that the new school will address the needs for the community and the schools going forward for the next 50 years. It's a lot more flexible than the present school, and there'll be a lot more opportunities for growth and changes in education. It won't be locked into one particular program. We're very fortunate, as Tim said, to have a contribution from the Mass School Building Authority. They've been very supportive. They've moved us to the head of the line as we've gone along because they see our need and they see that we've been prepared. And as you heard earlier, we looked at a base repair. And the problem with that is, as soon as you start working on the building, it triggers all the other code upgrades. And before long, you're spending $65 million over a period of 5 to 10 years on an old building. With the MSBA contribution, we can spend less than that and have a new building that'll last us for 50 years. So we're asking for your support. And if you have any questions, we'd be glad to take them afterwards. Thank you.